In 2008, the world economy fell off a cliff. It was a moment of sheer panic. The stock market was in a free fall, legendary banks that seemed as permanent as mountains were on the verge of extinction, and the financial security of an entire generation seemed to just evaporate. But beneath this global story of crisis, a much darker, more targeted story was unfolding. For Black America, this wasn't just a crisis. It was a crime scene. While Wall Street executives who caused a meltdown received multi-billion-dollar bailouts, nearly half of all black wealth was systematically wiped off the map. A study from the era reveals a devastating statistic. Between 2005 and 2009, the median net worth for black households plummeted by an unbelievable 53%. For white households, the drop was a painful, but much smaller 17%. This was not an accident. It was not an unfortunate side effect of a downturn in the economy. This was a result of a calculated, predatory, and racially targeted campaign of financial extraction. So, how did the biggest, most powerful banks in the world pull off the single largest heist of generational wealth in modern American history? To truly understand, you have to look at the weapon they chose, the American dream itself. For generations, the surest path to prosperity in America has been sold as a simple idea, homeownership. It's more than just a roof over your head. For most families, it's the primary way to build wealth that can be passed down, a foundation for the next generation. But this dream was historically a segregated one. For decades, black families were systematically locked out by racist, government-backed practices like redlining. Banks, with the full support of the government, would literally draw red lines on maps around black neighborhoods, declaring them hazardous and refusing to provide fair mortgage loans to the people who lived there. This policy didn't just deny loans. It denied futures. It starved communities of investment and declared them, by federal decree, unworthy of wealth. By the early 2000s, this began to change, but not for the better. The overt no of redlining evolved into something far more sinister, a predatory yes. Financial firms, drunk on deregulation and desperate for explosive profits, looked at these same historically excluded communities. But they didn't see families trying to build a better life. They saw a vast, untapped market, ripe for exploitation. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a family. We'll call them the Williams. For years, they did everything right. They worked hard, paid their bills on time, saved every dollar they could. Their dream was simple: to own a home, a tangible asset in their own community, something they could one day pass on to their children. In the superheated housing market of the mid-2000s, that dream finally felt within reach. Mortgage brokers, like missionaries of a new gospel of wealth, flooded their neighborhood. They ran ads on the radio. They partnered with trusted community leaders. They promised easy money and a fast track to a dream that had been denied for a century. The Williams family, like millions of others, thought they were finally getting their shot at the American dream. They had no idea they were walking straight into a meticulously designed trap. The trap had a name: the subprime mortgage. On the surface, it was marketed as a lifeline, a special loan for those with less than perfect credit. In reality, it was a financial time bomb, engineered to fail from the moment the papers were signed. Here is how the scam worked. A subprime loan would begin with a low, incredibly attractive teaser interest rate. A family like the Williams would be shown a monthly payment that looked completely affordable, maybe even less than their rent. But buried deep within hundreds of pages of fine print, the trap was set. After 2 or 3 years, that teaser rate was designed to expire, and the interest rate would explode, causing their monthly payments to double or even triple virtually overnight. This wasn't a flaw in the system. It was the system working exactly as intended. And here's where the strategy becomes truly criminal: who they targeted with these toxic loans. It wasn't just people with bad credit. In fact, study after study confirmed that Black and Latino borrowers who were perfectly qualified for safe, conventional, prime mortgages were intentionally steered into these high-cost, subprime loans. Think about the blatant racism of this. Data showed that upper-income Black families were twice as likely to be pushed into a subprime loan as low-income white families. At the peak of the housing bubble in 2006, an astounding 54% of all Black home buyers were given subprime loans, more than double the rate for white home buyers. This was not a coincidence. It was a deliberate strategy. Former Wells Fargo employees later testified under oath that they were directed to aggressively push what they internally called ghetto loans in black communities. They targeted people they believed weren't savvy enough to understand the complex terms, seeing them not as customers, but as easy marks. The banks weren't managing risk. They were hunting for victims. So why on earth would banks aggressively sell loans they knew were designed to fail? The answer is simple and cynical. They figure out a way to get paid and pass the risk to someone else before the bomb went off. This is where the scam transforms from a local hustle into a global Wall Street conspiracy. Instead of holding on to these mortgages, investment banks would buy them up from the original lenders. They then bundled thousands of them together, mixing a few good, stable loans with a mountain of toxic, subprime ones into a complex financial product called mortgage-backed security, or MBS. It's like making a giant poison fruit salad. The bankers would take a handful of high-quality strawberries, the safe, prime loans, and toss them with a massive pile of rotting fruit, the subprime loans destined to default. Then they'd blend it all together, put in a beautiful, fancy package, and sell it to investors as a healthy, diversified portfolio. To make this rotten salad look delicious, they paid the credit rating agencies, companies like Moody's and Standard & Poor's, to give these toxic bundles a AAA rating. That's the highest possible rating for safety and security, the same rating given to United States government bonds. It was a complete and utter lie, a paid-for seal of approval. But it worked. Investors all over the world, from pension funds managing teachers and firefighters' retirement money to entire foreign countries, bought them up by the trillions. The banks that created them, like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, made billions in fees just for packaging and selling this financial garbage. This created a perverse incentive. The more garbage loans they could find on Main Street, the more securities they could build on Wall Street, and the more massive bonuses their executives could collect. They lit the fuse on a time bomb, passed it to the rest of the world, and walked away with the cash. For the Williams family, the nightmare began right on schedule. 2 years into their dream, a letter arrived. Their teaser rate had expired. Their payment shot through the roof, from an affordable monthly amount to something utterly impossible. They tried to refinance, but by then, the housing market was collapsing. Their home was suddenly worth less than what they owed on their mortgage. They were trapped underwater, with no way out. Millions of families were in the exact same boat. As foreclosures began to pile up, one by one, the rot inside those AAA securities finally started to stink up Wall Street. The products they had hailed as financial genius were exposed as worthless. Panic ignited. The global financial system froze. In September 2008, the investment bank Lehman Brothers collapsed, and the world economy had a heart attack. But the real, lasting devastation was on Main Street. Foreclosure signs spread like a plague through black neighborhoods. Homeowners in majority black communities were more than twice as likely to lose their homes as white homeowners. The one asset that was supposed to build generational wealth was now the very instrument being used to steal it. The numbers are simply catastrophic. The median wealth for a black household cratered to just $5,600, while for a white household, it stood at over $113,000. The racial wealth gap, which had been slowly narrowing for decades, became a gaping canyon. By 2016, the median white household had 10 times the wealth of a black household, a gap even wider than it was before the crisis. It was an economic demolition that erased 30 years of progress in the span of 30 months. And the most infuriating part? The absolute lack of accountability. In the aftermath of a crisis that cost millions their homes and wrecked the global economy, not a single high-level bank executive went to jail. The banks that peddled the predatory loans, like Wells Fargo, paid some fines, but these were just a fraction of the profits they made and were treated as a simple cost of doing business. They received a slap on the wrist for orchestrating a global catastrophe. The government, our government, bailed out the banks with taxpayer money, declaring them too big to fail, but left the families they victimized to drown. Knowing this history isn't about dwelling on the past. It's about understanding that the systems and incentives that allowed this heist to happen are still very much in place. If this story makes you angry, share it. Because the first step toward any form of justice is making damn sure the truth isn't forgotten. The 2008 financial crisis was not a glitch in the system. It was a predictable, horrifying outcome of a system that has always viewed black communities in one of two ways: as a problem to be contained or a resource to be plundered. This was merely a 21st century update of redlining. The old strategy of active exclusion was simply replaced with a new strategy of predatory inclusion. The legacy of this heist is a racial wealth gap that is wider and more entrenched than it was a generation ago. Because of the wealth stripped away during the crisis, the financial trajectory of a typical black family was set back for decades to come. Those gleaming towers on Wall Street, they were rebuilt, in part, with the money stripped from communities of color. Many of the executives who presided over the crash are doing just fine, and the regulations that were put in place to stop this from ever happening again, they are being weakened and dismantled year after year. Meanwhile, the neighborhoods that were targeted are still fighting, still rebuilding, still try to reclaim the generational wealth that was stolen from them in broad daylight. The crime scene may have been cleaned up, but the victims are still paying the price. And that is a truth we can never afford to forget.